Planning for war requires proper consideration for supporting medical services and rescue protocols. As Germany prepared to launch the Blitz against the United Kingdom in 1940 and 1941, Germany encountered this difficult logistics problem when trying to save bomber pilots and crews from the hostile waters surrounding the UK after emergency landings. At the time, rescue mission planning had been mostly confined to ground battles and naval conflicts, and the use of bombers on coastal territories required new technology and ideas. Out of this need arose the Seenotdienst, a military branch of the German Air Force dedicated to rescuing sea-stranded aircraft crew. To accomplish its mission, the Seenotdienst created a bizarre German sea rescue buoy that would be covertly anchored across secret locations in the waters of the English Channel. Most of each buoy would rest underwater, and the hidden interior compartment could safely house pilots and crew members in freezing waters for days. The German Luftwaffe knew it had a problem with emergency water landings as it prepared for bombings on multiple fronts. There was no efficient method or dedicated group to rescue pilots from long-distance over-water campaigns, which meant a possible loss of investment in well-trained crews. Lieutenant Colonel Conrad Goltz was tasked with assembling a rescue organization to deal with this specific issue in 1935. He gathered information and sought assistance from the Kriegsmarine, lifeboat groups, and the Deutsche Gesellschaft zur Rettung Schiffbrüchiger, or the Maritime Search and Rescue Service. The resulting organization was the Seenotdienst, or Air Sea Rescue Service, which was formed with civilian and military members. The fleet of aircraft attached to the project were registered as civilian planes. The Seenotdienst was a serious branch of the Luftwaffe, was well-funded, and it counted on shore-based stations with medical crews, aircraft, and some of the quickest German ships. In 1939, the prospect of waging war against the United Kingdom was becoming more and more of a certainty. That meant that pilots would soon be traveling over the English Channel to bomb enemy territory or to support coastal attacks. The Luftwaffe had every intention of being prepared for the occasion, and launched multiple test rescue exercises far out to sea from the coast of the North and Baltic Seas. As Germany's bomber aircraft had a limited range, sending them from inland would have been too difficult to manage, and the Luftwaffe built coastal bases in the lowlands of Europe alongside the Seenotdienst centers of operation. In addition to the bases, it was necessary to obtain a seaplane specifically built to rescue those stranded at sea. The Seenotdienst model was to become so successful that soon after the start of the war, the United States Air Force and the British Royal Air Force organized their own rescue sources. The air-to-sea rescue seaplane that the Germans settled on using was the HE-59, a twin-engine biplane. The first prototype to be flown took off in 1931, designated HE-59B, but it was actually the earlier model, HE-59A, that was chosen for mass production. At first, the HE-59 had been used as a reconnaissance aircraft, but it became almost exclusively used as a rescue plane, since it had a relatively weak engine and other less than optimal features such as a small carrying capacity and little to no armament. Of the 142 HE-59s produced, 14 were sent to be modified, adding floats, first aid tools, electric heat sleeping bags, medical equipment for artificial respiration, a hoist, signaling equipment, lockers for gear, and a floor hatch with a ladder for rescues. Despite being painted white and labeled with the Red Cross symbol, many in the Allied army still feared that the planes were used for reconnaissance, and they were often shot down when encountered. After the plane was incorporated into the Seenotdienst, 2 additional bases were set up at Stavanger and Bergen in Norway, and 1 at Aalborg in Denmark. With rescue bases and aircraft in place, there was just 2 more issues the Luftwaffe had to confront: how to keep pilots alive at sea, and how to locate them in the midst of a conflict in a quick and efficient manner. Operation Sea Lion, the planned German invasion of Britain, needed aircraft bombers to give the Germans an advantage if they ever hoped of conquering the United Kingdom, as the War Navy of the Third Reich was outmatched by the Royal Navy. The need for bomber support made the involvement of the Seenotdienst essential in Germany's planning. Unfortunately, neither Germany nor Britain initially considered how exactly they would locate fallen pilots at sea. The Battle of Britain was one of the first major confrontations of the Second World War, involving almost only aircraft fighters, with Germany ferociously bombing the British Isles. The Battle of Britain and the Blitz saw hundreds of pilots fall into the sea awaiting rescue, oftentimes in freezing temperatures. What the Germans hoped would be a swift victory, as their conquest of France had been, turned out to be a long, drawn-out battle. The battle resulted in a loss of 1,250 British aircraft and over 1,700 Luftwaffe aircraft, a loss from which Germany did not manage to recover for the rest of the war. The Luftwaffe had 30 HE-59s fully furnished for rescue. Yet not all of these planes were able to reach fallen pilots, since many of them were attacked by British forces. As Churchill explained in writing, quote, "We did not recognize this means of rescuing enemy pilots so they could come and bomb our civilian population again. All German air ambulances were forced down or shot down by our fighters on definite orders approved by the War Cabinet." The international rules set by the Geneva Convention were often ignored, since the British feared that the HE-59s were not being used for their supposed rescue purpose. Additionally, the planes were often in flight with German bombers, which made it easier to excuse taking them down. In one alleged incident, crew members of a flight convoy traveling through the English Channel saw one of these rescue planes and was subsequently bombed, arousing suspicion that it was in fact carrying out reconnaissance tasks. This was further supported when the British captured a pilot of one of these planes off the coast of Deal and found notes tracing the bomber convoy in his logbook. The British Air Ministry subsequently published Bulletin 1254, ordering the destruction of all enemy air-sea rescue aircraft upon encounter. Nevertheless, the Seenotdienst was still able to rescue pilots from both sides, taking British ones as prisoners of war. Unfortunately, noted by both Britain and Germany, there was a phenomenon that the Germans termed Rettungskollaps, or rescue collapse. This referred to the fact that some pilots stranded in the cold northern European waters would survive for only about an hour after being extracted from the sea. These harsh conditions led the Third Reich to conduct tests on POWs that would help the regime understand the cold temperatures and time frames that a human body could be exposed to, as well as which methods were better for heating a body back up. These investigations did not always yield the best results, and the Seenotdienst saw the need for a way to keep the pilots as least exposed to cold water as possible upon an emergency landing. With that in mind, the Reich Air Ministry, or Reichsluftfahrtministerium, asked the Technisches Amt to research and develop a flotation solution to keep pilots and aircraft crew alive in the sea. Generaloberst Ernst Udet, who was known for developing dive bombing techniques and who was a key supporter of the Junkers U-87 or Stuka dive bomber, sent the directive to the Technisches Amt to develop new techniques for rescue that the Luftwaffe could use. On its own accord, the Seenotdienst itself also worked on new inventions, among them inflatable dinghies and a fluorescent dye that could mark a landing site by painting the water green. All Luftwaffe planes were then given these tools. As for the T-Amt designs, Generaloberst Udet suggested their invention himself in 1940. The result was the Rettungsbojen, translated in English to mean sea rescue buoys. They also became known as Udet-Buoy after their creator. Anchored to the seafloor at key points of either battlefield or expected battlefields, they could be checked daily, and they were painted in yellow for visibility. Inside, they had 2 double-deck bunk beds for up to 4 people, although more could stand inside the buoy. They were equipped with cupboards holding all the supplies a stranded pilot and his crew would need to survive. Emergency rations of food and water, 25 liters of water at least, first aid equipment, dry clothes, an emergency alcohol-fueled stove, game cards to pass the time, stationery, plugs to cover boat holes, pumps to take out water, and even cognac and cigarettes to alleviate their spirits. The buoys counted on electricity provided by batteries, but were also stocked with kerosene lamps in case of an unexpected power outage. These supplies were meant to last for a maximum of 4 days, with rescuers replenishing them upon arrival. To aid the rescue missions, the buoy also had an inflatable lifeboat. The WW2 saved Britons as well as Germans, who came to know them as lobster pots based on their appearance. The buoy was also stocked with light pistols and parachute flares. In order to signal the presence of stranded individuals, the buoy had a yellow and red flag and black anchor ball that could be hoisted on the mast at daytime, and had an anchor light on the mast for nighttime that could be seen from 3,000 feet away. Additionally, the location of the buoy could be sent out along with SIS signals through a wireless transmitter. Over the rest of the Battle of Britain, 50 of these buoys were put in place throughout the English Channel, and 2 of them were eventually captured by Britain for study. One, placed in Bria Harbor in German-occupied Alderney, was even supposedly manned by soldiers with machine guns. The WW2 went beyond their intended use, inspiring the British Air-Sea Rescue Float, designed after the capture of the buoys. Designed not only to rescue downed aircrew, but also adapted to bomb enemy targets from the British Channel. The loss of several of the German survival buoys also served to boost British morale. As an ad reported to the Nambour Chronicle in April of 1941 read, quote, "Fitted with mattresses, blankets, food, toilet necessities, signals. Several of these yellow-painted refuges have washed ashore on the English coast. The fact is that many of their raiding planes are sent home crippled by the British guns."